Senator Dr. Bukola Saraki. So at this point, I'll hand over to our moderator to take charge. Over to you.
Your Excellencies, the Senate President, all the ministers here present, all other protocols observed. We've had a very, very impactful day, and we've discussed a number of critical issues that will drive the Made for Nigeria and Made in Nigeria agenda. And I think this is a really timely session, and we're delighted that the Senate President has made the time to be with us today.
And it's my pleasure. I remember last year, I wasn't here for your summit because I said to myself I had nothing to report. And I know this is one of the harshest people to sit before. I think what tends to happen, I remember when I was in the private sector and there was economic summit, we always get ready because there's a time to give government a hard time. So you better come here prepared, otherwise you end up. So I'm happy to report about the NASSBER. It actually came as a follow-up to last economic summit. And I did say to the president at that time that, look, listen, let's find a roundtable, a forum where we can discuss private sector and also legislators. You know the kind of environment you need to stimulate business, grow SMEs, etc. Most of our laws in the country are outdated, if you see most of them. And if we work together, we can identify and prioritize the ones that are what we call high priority, low, and medium. And basically, that's what the report did. And since we got the report, we've tried to identify the high priority ones. And I think, well, as you said, I thought there were 45, probably more than that. And we're just taking them one by one. I know we've passed a few so far to do with things like bankruptcy, credit scheme in the agri sector, credit guarantee, especially for the small-scale farmers. We're looking at CAMA at the moment to see how we can, shorten that process. We're looking at warehouse receipts. We're also looking at electronic transactions. So basically what we're doing, just working through that report. And our plan is to ensure that at least, before the end of our session, we'll have substantially dealt with most of the important. So really it's a document. I don't know whether the committee distributed copies of that document. And I think it was a well-produced document. I basically just list all those bills. And all we're just trying to do is work through that. And it's a work in progress. But I think the advantage is, one, for the first time, we're truly engaging with the private sector. For the first time, we're guiding our actions based on need. It's not a case of where we're just passing laws that have no relevance to people's lives or businesses. So I think that's a great achievement, and we're engaging. So I think your role and our role is just to make sure that, we implement and try and pass as many as possible. And I think we've started that.
Well, thank you very much. I commend you for your partnership with the private sector and your openness to engage and prioritize, which is critical. Many Nigerians, though, are very frustrated with the pace of progress at the Senate and the House, and specifically at the Senate, which is your purview. What would you say it will take to increase the efficiency and effectiveness by which the Senate operates, specifically for some of the bills? I think we've listed 8 bills that are critical for doing business in this environment, especially now when Nigerian businesses are hurting more than ever before.
Well, we've identified 11 for now that we've kind of put on a fast-track basis. So as the 8 we've identified, PIB, for example. Unfortunately, we should, by now, we should have passed the PIB. But unfortunately, PIB, the time we're deliberating about it was the same time we had the problems in the Niger Delta. And a lot of the senators from the South came up, and rightly so, felt that the timing was not the best, because if you remember, one of the plans we have for PIB is to break it into different sections. And the only sections we're treating now was the petroleum governance part of it. And our fear was that those in the communities who were thinking about the issues as regards their communities, there's no reference to them in that bill. And without proper advocacy and enlightenment, they might get the wrong impression that the PIB we want to pass now has nothing to address community issues. And with what was happening in the Niger Delta, we said we step it down. But now, we're now trying to see how we can bring that back up again. That's one that we're really keen that we will pass that. The second one also that we're looking at is the one both to do with CAMA and to do with investment securities. Again, is under the 11 that we have 11 bills so far that we have classified under bills that we need to act in order to push us out of the economic recession. Nigerian ports is our second reading. We're looking at that. We've passed the railway. That was a 50-year-old act that really had no provisions for private sector participation. We've done that. We're looking at two other ones to do with road commission and road authority, really to encourage private sector participation. Our view is that government doesn't have the resources, very unlikely to have the resources to fast-track the kind of development we want on our roads. And the only way we can do that is to see how we can create laws that would truly, truly enable private sector to participate in those areas. We also looked at, one of the things we're also looking at are certain laws as well that we think will also, for example, I talked about agriculture. We've passed that one. Because in the past, a lot of you know that a lot of the money that was provided by central bank to support agriculture was going to the large-scale farmers. Most of the banks, of course, understandably preferred to do on-lending to the bigger farmers who were borderline farming, borderline trade. But what we try to do now under the Credit Agric is to really reduce the minimum amount and try and encourage it mainly to small-scale farmers. And I think that will go a long way in doing that. So these are the ones that the 11 under the economic recession ones, we want to pass this on this year, because our view is that will help a long way, whatever the executive is doing in trying to get us out of this economic recession. Talking about it's been slow, yes, I think I would admit that, but I think it's a mindset. We're changing the way business used to be done, and we need to appreciate that. Sometimes the thing about legislation is that sometimes the method and the process sometimes leads the actual what you're trying to do. Sometimes it's the case of the tail, leading the, it's really wagging the head. Because the problem is that people are more concerned about processes, but we're trying to shorten that based on some of the things we're doing. And that's why we've been able to pass some of these laws. And I'm confident by year-end, a lot of these 11 bills hopefully will have passed them.
Thank you. I'll ask one more question before I open it up to the rest of the members here. So earlier today, we had a discussion on this same platform about special interest groups and some of the big dogs influencing policy at the expense of the rest of the society. And I'm just curious, how do you, as the Senate President, ensure that special interests don't win and that the SMEs and the rest of the population who don't have power, that their voices are represented and heard when decisions are made and policies are passed on your floor?
Well, I think as you see, you find that most of the senators are all representing people from different constituencies. And I really don't see that much in passing some of the laws because some of the laws that affect SMEs also have value also for the big companies. I don't think our economy has developed to that stage yet where some of the issues we're talking about, if you're talking about infrastructure, it's good for the SMEs as well as good for the bigger companies. If you're talking about the PIB, if you're talking about, agriculture is one good example I just talked about, where we had to think about the interests of the small-scale farmers, because before most of the agric money you see are going to the bigger. So that's one where we had to single out to see how we can support But even when you talk about small-scale farmers, and I think we need to be careful here, the small-scale farmers also work better and thrive better with support from the big farmers. And all we need to do is ensure that there's a window where small-scale farmers can get credit and also provide a window for the large-scale farmers. But by and large, I don't think in reality that that is a problem so much now in some of the bills that we're talking about. These are bills that are good for all type of businesses, whether they're small-scale or large-scale. So that's not a great challenge. I think when we start talking about the competition bill, I think that's when it's going to get a bit hot.
Right, right. Okay, well, thank you for your vision, and thank you for your openness, at least, to being pushed on some of these issues. And I know that members of the audience have been waiting for an opportunity to ask questions.
With all due respect, sir, how can the Senate help us to
influence
on the monetary policy,
to influence CBN, monetary policy, and the banks?
More funding to all the sectors.
Your Excellency, sir, thank you very much for your exposition. My question is a simple one. I see that NASSBER has done quite a bit, but I think one of the things that affects us in the private sector is the issue of taxation. I don't know if this is something that is central to what NASSBER is doing, and if it isn't, sir, is that something that you could perhaps look into? The tax regime, multiple taxation, redundancy of taxation to some extent, and I think the rate at which we pay. Thank you very much.
Okay. So let's just take those two questions and then we'll go back to them. Yeah.
The first, well, I'm not sure whether that was the first one was a question or, well, let me try and try. I think one of the things that I want to talk about, which is why we're all here, is the concept of made in Nigeria. I think that's one of the concepts that's been brought about to try and stimulate, not only small, medium-sized enterprises. And this, started sometime last year. I had the opportunity to visit a trade fair where a lot of manufacturers, entrepreneurs from Aba came to Abuja and produced a lot of stuff, from boots, T-shirts, etc. And we realized at that point that we needed to help them to bring that at the national level. We need to bring that discourse to the national level. And coming out of that program was when we went back to the Senate and said, what can we do just to see how we can stimulate SMEs? And we now amended the procurement law. We finally passed this in, I think it was June this year, where we now put a new section in the procurement law that makes it mandatory for government to ensure that our first option, they must buy locally produced goods. And if we consider that government spends on goods and services, plus goods and services, both consumables and capital expenditure, close to probably something in the region of probably 2.5 trillion. That creates a readable market for us to see how a lot of our entrepreneurs can target. And to show you that this really happened, after that, I've had courtesy call from different entrepreneurs who have come to my office, who are now using our office to lobby their case. I had a lady, she has a small industry, she produces envelopes, and she was telling me the frustration she's having, that government agencies prefer to buy imported envelopes instead of supporting our own business. And you ask yourself, how bad can this locally produced envelope be? I mean, anyway, the damn thing, what is going to be in the envelope is probably not even worth the imported document. The point is that until now, there was no law that was ensuring that we will support locally produced industries. And I think that what we're doing now, we're just waiting for the House of Rep to concur on that and for the President to sign that. And then the oversight is all ours. And I think that an Economic Summit Group can work with us on this, because there are a lot of industries that have factories that produce something that they believe that the quality is enough for government to support. And we know that a lot of the government would not want to buy that. They prefer to go and buy the imported. We can now play our oversight and continue to chase these agencies around and ensure. Let's try and think the two factors here. Not only will we stimulate locally produced industry because we now provide them a ready market. Secondly, we are going to see the fact that there's foreign exchange substitution. The demand on the foreign exchange also will come down significantly. So I think if we just work on this alone, I think it will have a great impact on the issue of SMEs. Just to talk, and then talking about the issue of central bank, I think we all agree from that point of view that central bank should see how they can continue to provide special intervention funds in the right sector, largely, we will say, SMEs, agriculture, and mining. But the question is this, even though you're providing those special intervention funds for the SMEs, my own experience is that we have to also create the market. I mean, because as banks will ask them, fine, you know, how do you intend, who's going to take the uptake for some of your products? So I think this law goes a long way in creating the enabling environment that makes those business viable and possible. So I take your point. On the issue of taxation, definitely one of the things we're working on when we pass for this year, we're hoping we can do it, and when we pass the appropriation act for this year, we're going to look at some of the tax regimes and also look at the custom and duty tariff and see areas of where they might need review. In the past, we have left that really at the purview of the executive, and this is something that we want to look at to see that, so that the appropriation bill is not just an act on expenditure. All over the world, it's not only expenditure, also, as you say, we look at revenues and look at fiscal incentives. So from that point of view, we intend to look into that and see what we can do. But again, as I said, this is a partnership. I believe that if the NASSBER also can play a role here in trying again to give us an idea of what your views and your thoughts are on some of these issues. I think the point we should take away from here is that I strongly believe that what we've tried to do in the Senate is to provide a platform that we're pro-business, we're pro-private sector. We believe that it is when the private sector thrives that the economy will truly thrive. But we are also limited because we're not the operators. And I think that partnership between you and us, where you tell us what will make you thrive, and then it is then our responsibility to act as quickly as efficient in creating that enabling environment.
Well, thank you for those very, very positive words. Pro-private sector and pro-business. I thought you guys would clap. We don't hear that very often coming from people in your seats. So we were talking earlier today about the political will, and it seems like we're starting to see some political will around private sector and enabling environment for private sector. Thank you.
My name is Philip Amato, European Union delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS. I have two questions. The first is, we have heard that there is a presidential council on ease of doing business. I'm aware that there was also, and I think it still exists, because I see that this is
just slow down a bit so we can follow you.
Yes.
So the Presidential Council on Ease on Doing Business, yeah, go ahead.
The Nigerian Competitiveness Council of National Competitiveness Council of Nigeria, yep. NCCN, yep. And at NASSBER as well. I just was wondering how these three bodies coordinate the work, which is, I understand, trying to achieve the same objective, how to improve ease of doing business. And then my second question, is there a source of information to see the progress done in this respect by these three bodies? I mean, a single source of information, a platform where I can easily see what is the progress done before, for instance, the World Bank report on ease of doing business will be published next year, so that we can gradually inform investors who are interested to come to Nigeria of the progress which has been done in this respect. Thank you.
Okay, great questions. Yeah, the lady right there.
Thank you. Shimita Bello, MSME Development Agency, Delta State. I'm going to make a suggestion. If there's anybody that can solve it, it will be the legislative arm. There are some positions in state government when we talk ease of doing business, political will. that we may need to use less political people and more professional people if we can do the ease of business. And that would be like Ministry of Economic Planning, Ministry of Justice, State Inland Revenue, and Lands. It is difficult to write a lot of things for people who are not interested in reading documentation, cannot interpret the documentation, and cannot. So I will stop here because I'm with the state government too. Thank you.
Okay. Great questions. Another lady over there, please.
What policies are in place to support the acceptance of made in Nigerian goods? For instance, my sector, which is real estate.
What's your sector?
Real estate.
Real estate.
Customers are not usually satisfied with made in Nigerian goods. So
you're talking about the construction industry?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. I stand on the existing protocols. I just want to ask if you can include in the things you're looking at the possibility of reviewing the insurance laws. Now, you have Nigerian Agric Insurance Corporation that maintains a monopoly on agric financing. Central Bank had approved that other insurance companies join, but the existing legislations can't allow those insurance companies to join. So how soon can this be looked at and adjusted?
My name is Ekenem Isichi. I work with the Corporate Council on Africa. So looking at the current African trends, you see a lot of FDI flows going to other countries. So I guess my question to you, sir, and the rest of the National Assembly is, a year from now, what do we expect will be the outcomes of some of the laws that have been put before you and some of the things that Nigerians hope to see to sort of bring us out of this recession into some light of growth? Thank you.
And I think we go back to, that's why I really like the president of the NASD, if we can make that document available, because basically the document looked at the criteria of why we're so low down in the ease of doing business. And we picked all the different areas like company registration, permits, etc. And then we now picked at which are those laws that needed to be passed for us to be able to move forward. And we have started that process. I think also we need to do is find a platform by which every time we pass those laws, people can be updated on. Now, what the executive is doing also is working the same line. There are some that don't need laws, that has to do with just policies. For example, issues to do with visas and those kind of issues. So those that are executive responsibilities, I guess the executive arm would do that. But if there are areas that needs legislative action, then we are ready to receive that from the executive. But I think from the work we did with the Nigeria Economic Summit, I think we covered most of the areas. It's now just for us to continue to update and inform the public where we are on that. So I think we need to probably rightly create some kind of platform where we can update you on a regular basis on that. Secondly, one of the other questions, I think you said it was an advice. I don't know which state you're...
Delta.
Delta. Well, Delta is a... don't let me speak on behalf of Delta. But I know that a lot of states today, I know when I was a governor, my commissioner for finance and my accountant general were those from the private sector were technocrats. And I think a lot of the states are doing that. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I thought Delta was moving in that direction as well. Okay, fine. Okay.
I think her comment can be extrapolated even to the national level, which is we need more private sector people.
No, but even in national level, I think some of the, we've seen in a lot of the governments, some of these key positions are driven by people in the private sector. I agree with you that we should do more, but I think we've made a lot of progress in that area. But the point is well noted, and I totally support that. I believe in that as well. Talking about the Made in Nigeria and support in the real estate and construction sector, again, my view is that once we have the law, I believe that we need a role we can play to ensure that government truly implements the law. For example, when I was governor in Kwara State, we had a furniture company that belonged to the state government, but it was run by professionals, and it wasn't a law, but it was agreed as a policy that all government furniture was supplied by that company. And that's, even after my time now, that is still the case. And even a lot of that company, apart from started off just doing government work, but before we knew it, in 2 years' time, after that, it was already, if you go to Federal Palace, all that furniture there was coming from the company in Kwara State. So the point is that it is doable. If you have the political will to do it, so now that we've passed the law, if we and you work together, because this is our other responsibility, is oversight. Once the law is passed, I personally believe that in things like tiles, furniture, Nigerians can do this, and I really believe that we are capable of doing this. But it's now the oversight to make sure, and I think we need to find a way of where people can raise their arm and shout and say, listen, this is what I have, this is what I produce, Ministry X is not giving me that chance. And I think if we do that, definitely I can see some progress. But I think that is the role that both ourselves and also the Economic Summit Group should be able to do. And I think we will see a lot of traction in that area. So I think that there is hope in that area that on the construction sector, we will see a lot of made in Nigeria projects being patronized. The example on the insurance, I'll take note of that. And I think, again, we have an area where we've in my office, where we have also appealed to people in the private sector. If they have certain laws that they believe that needs immediate review, they can let us have an opinion. 2 laws have come out from that kind of action. I think before I go, I'll give that link to the president, and where you have specific laws in your sector that you think, look, we should look at this and amend this, and it has value. We will definitely do that. I think that's the point I'm making, that the difference this time is that we're driving our laws based by need. And we're the first to admit we can't really know all the different sectors. And I think what you've said is a very valid point. There are many of our laws, they were done in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And, over the years, nobody has actually sat down. And both the House of Rep and ourselves are now doing a holistic approach. As you can imagine, it's a long process trying to do that. But the priority ones that are important, if we pick them out due to recommendations by yourselves, then we can see how we can fast-track some of those ones. And the last question talked about what do we hope to report in about a year's time, and to say what have we been able to do. I would like to see that in a year's time, we have, of course, we'll have passed, the 2 houses will have concurred on the procurement bill, which is now become a procurement act. We would be able to start implementing it. A lot of companies will be able to come here to your summit and say that the Ministry of Commerce is now patronizing them, and et cetera, and we're beginning to see that. I would like to see that the PIB will have been passed, both the governance one and also the fiscal aspect of it too will have addressed that. I would like to see that the ports and harbor and road transport has been passed as well, CAMA and ISA. But from my own point of view, I'm not looking at a year, because the timetable we have put for ourselves is that we need to do that before year end on some of these things. We need urgency on the issue of the economy. We need to treat it with the urgency that it deserves. We don't have time. I think that that is what is lacking, and I think we are doing our best to provide that urgency in addressing some of these issues. So I'm hoping that before year end, some of this key legislative action will have been started and completed. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one final round of questions.
Good evening, Your Excellency. My name is Nana Ude. My question is going to be on the back of the last comment that you made. Some of the legislations that we are talking about are listed as priority legislations. That means timeline attached to it. And we understand that in the Senate and in the House, they have their rules. You do first reading, second reading, and third reading. When you pass a bill in the Senate, it goes to the House, it passes through the same process. is it possible for the National Assembly to come together and work out a fast-track mechanism that will say, when a bill has gone through that process in one chamber, then a fast-track mechanism can kickstart in the other chamber to ensure that we don't go that route again. Take the railway bill, for instance. It took about 1 year for the Senate to pass it. Now, we are through that same process
what
again.
did you say?
The railway bill was laid in June last year and passed in July this year in the Senate. Okay. Then in the House, the process is now on. There are a number of bills like that. You do a public hearing in the Senate. After 4 or 5 months, you do another set of public hearings again in the House. Can the National Assembly work together to develop a fast-track mechanism so that when one chamber passes it, then a fast-track can kick off in the other one, and we don't have to go through that? The second question is that some of these bills also have special interests moving against them. For instance, the competition bill. How will the Senate or the National Assembly respond to such pressures from special interests to such bills like the competition bill? Thank you very much.
We also identified this issue of the procedure of having a bicameral legislative arm. And what we agreed with the House of Rep, and if you've been watching since we came back now, on Thursdays, we do concurrence. That means bills have been passed in the House of Rep. And what we do now is that we step down our rules, and we take first reading, second reading, third reading all the same day. And that's why last Friday we passed about 15 House of Rep bills into law. So we've taken note of that, and now we both agreed on that. Once we pass on one end and they pass the other end, it becomes a priority. It must come for concurrence. And by and large, it's not necessarily that it must go to another public hearing unless there's certain objection. And that is why some of it is moving much faster now. So you've made a good point. But again, if you've noticed in the last few weeks, we've been trying to do that. Because we need to pass, as I said, we need to pass this, as if I knew as I was coming here, I have one document with me which pretty much just tells me the 11 bills, what day first reading, second reading, lay report, and consideration, which we're working with. As much, just like you, I appreciate that time is not an aside to address these issues. So I appreciate the importance of us, and that is why sometimes, the procedure, we need to be in charge of the procedures, not the procedures tell us, because at the end of the day, we must deliver. So, but sometimes you find that there are parliamentarians who, really want to stick to the procedure. But I think we're winning that now and trying to make a little bit concessions here and there to fast-track some of those issues. And then on your second point, on the issue of competition, I don't think interest would deter us from doing what we need to do. Whatever we believe is the interest of the country would override all the other interests. I mean, I think that's clear from our own point of view. Yeah, there will be challenges here and there, but at the end of it, we'll deliver on those issues. Because at the end of the day, what is more peculiar to us now is really how do we address the issue of the economy. And if we believe that those competition laws will help, then definitely we'll address it. But I think when the public hearing comes, you need to participate and ensure that you also contribute and ensure that your views are taken and a majority of the views there.
Your Excellency, my name is Professor Chegmajibola, President Chartered of Bankers of Nigeria. We have a major issue in this jurisdiction. Any session of National Assembly, whenever a bill is discussed and the session is unable to complete the passage of that bill, or is not assented to by the president, the next session of the National Assembly starts the discussion de novo. This has created a problem where whenever a session is going to the end, it becomes difficult for any new bill to be introduced for the fear that that session may not complete it and it will be a waste of time and another session will start all over. Can't we, as a country, as a jurisdiction, start a system whereby wherever a particular session stops in the consideration of a bill, the new session takes over from there. It saves time, it saves resources, and it moves things forward faster in this jurisdiction, Your Excellency.
My name is Dr. Yaki Ogon from Oil and Gas Sector. I want to talk about property right we can talk about enhancing Nigerian businesses, but if we don't solve the issue of property rights, where if your right is injured, you have to be in the courts for several years to enforce property right. We need to get that right.
And my name is Haman Kwajafa from Nigerian Textile Manufacturers Association. I'd like to commend you for amending and passing the Procurement Act. We thank you for that. But we want one request, that the senators will set one day to wear made in Nigeria, so that others will follow up, and then it will multiply.
Yeah, let me take the last question. That was the easier one. I will send you a picture of the day that I wear in Nigeria. If you see it, I even look better in that one than... But the point is noted. I mean, but I don't think, because when we started this, and I'm happy Senator Ben Bruce is here, when we started this Made in Nigeria agenda last year, people were joking about it that, oh, you know, they were taking, what I'm saying, that they were looking at the small issues. And I think that I see a great opportunity here. Truly, if we hold government to the law, if we support the small-scale industries to fill in that gap, I truly believe that we can stimulate the growth. I'll go back to the first question on the emergency power. I don't know where your source is. I've not seen any document. But if you have seen something, maybe you can share with me. But as the chairman of the National Assembly, I have not seen anything, and I don't want to comment on something that is speculative. When it does come, then I'll come and answer your question. On the second point, you've made a very valid, very good point. And that is why what we're doing now in the Constitution amendment, we're making an amendment to the Constitution that pretty much says, I'm not a lawyer, I can't give it, but the summary really is that once we pass a law in the National Assembly, it becomes law unless within 30 days the president sends it back. What happens now is that we pass the law, and all the president needs to do is just keep it in his office, and time will lapse, and we have to start all over again. But we flipped it, we've turned it the other way around now. If the president doesn't do anything, it becomes a law. So that will stop. So if the 8th Senate passes so many laws, after 30 days, it will become effective. Whether the president signs or does not sign, he has to take an action to veto it. But as it is in the Constitution, he doesn't need to do anything. If he can just keep it, it will just lapse, and that's why we have a case where people have to start de novo. So hopefully when that constitutional amendment passes, we will have resolved that problem. The third question, property rights, that is why truly I really can't emphasize enough why I think the report that we did following the NASSBER needs to be circulated to all members of the Economic Summit Group, because in there, I think it's one of the priority laws that we must amend on property rights. So it already, your question has been covered. The question from the chap from Central Bank. Well, I don't know how you create the fund, you disburse the fund, you set the policy. So I think I leave it to you. I leave it to you to know how to say no to governors. But if you want me to teach you how to say no to governors, that's a different kettle of fish. But on a serious note, I think there are a lot of people who argue that even those intervention funds truly, whether central bank really has those powers to be able to do those intervention funds the way they're doing it. But that's a story for another day. But I think at the end of the day, you're very right that some of these funds are not really going to the real sectors. I've just used agriculture as an example. Okay. I remember in the President Yar'Adua administration, where about 100 billion, or I think it was 100 billion that was taken out of the natural resources fund that was meant to be intervention in the agricultural sector, and it was meant to go there to assist farming. But you found at the end of the day, 80% of those that took those loans really were multinationals or conglomerates that had agric somewhere there, but agriculture was not the main issue. because as we all know, they are the big people. They're the people that could lobby. They're the people that could get those funds. And that is why we're trying to look at some of the laws to ensure that if we're talking about agriculture, we should be able to find two windows. There should be a window that small-scale farmers are competing with small-scale farmers for access to that credit, not small-scale farmers competing with the bigger companies. And that's what, if we can do that, at the same time, I believe, too, we must support truly the big agriculture companies. And that takes me to one of the laws also we want to pass, especially in agriculture and solid minerals. There's some policies of government that we believe that just policies does not give the confidence. And one of the recommendations we're making is that we want to look at some policies of government that we want to back with law with time frame. Because we believe, for example, in the agricultural sector, a lot of investors that know it takes probably 5-10 years to really be able to see a return on that investment are very worried that those policies can somersault within 1 year. So we're looking now to see how we can back some of those policies by law where you know that this policy would stay for a minimum of 5 years or 10 years, and we review. And I think that will help tremendously in investment in those sectors. So we're looking at, that's part of our recommendations this year, to work particularly with Ministry of Agri and Solid Minerals and see how some of these policies can have the backing of the law.
Well, join me in thanking the Senate President for answering all of those questions. Just to summarize, sorry to mention also that NASSBER, the whole report is on the app that you have for the NASG, so you can download it if you want to get it and read it, please. Just to summarize this discussion, first of all, I would say that I'm leaving with an understanding that you share a sense of urgency about the state of affairs of our nation, that you're committed to reform, and that you are committed to enacting and passing some bills before the end of this year. You've told us 11. And that by next year, we're going to see some rapid changes. And that gives me some hope. And I'm sure those in the audience are also leaving a little hopeful. The last point I'd like to make is that you have said to us that you're open to partnerships with business and with NASG. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. Go together. That's an African proverb. And I think the Senate has demonstrated today that it's ready to go far. It's ready to go with NASG. It's ready to go with the private sector. We're going to be holding you accountable, and we're going to be ready to see some progress. So thank you.
Okay,
please join me in thanking him as well.
Thank you. Let me just respond to that. I'm leaving here too that you're joining my urgency.
Yes, we're going together.
And secondly, the fact that, as we said, the partnership already exists, and I think we should build on it. I think we should take away some of these issues. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I apologize on behalf of the speaker for not being here, but I played a smart one. I'm taking this one this year, so that next year he's the one that I have to